church leader, a devoted wife, a mother of two. Pastor Evelyn Monroe seemed to have it all: a loving husband, a beautiful family, and a respected place in her community. Every Sunday, she stood at the pulpit, preaching about faith, family, and truth. To those who knew her, she was the perfect example of a godly woman. But Evelyn was living a lie. Behind closed doors, she was in a secret relationship with Naomi Fields. What started as a hidden connection turned into something serious, something Evelyn knew could destroy the life she had built. Naomi didn't want to hide anymore. She wanted Evelyn to choose. But Evelyn wasn't willing to lose everything. Then, one night, Naomi disappeared. Evelyn claimed she had nothing to do with it, but investigators started asking questions. And soon, the truth began to unravel. How far would someone go to keep a secret hidden? And when faced with losing everything, what choices would they make? In this documentary, we'll break down the double life, the deception, and the investigation that exposed everything. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. Let's get into it. In the town of Oak Ridge, faith was everything. Families filled the church pews every Sunday, listening closely to the woman they trusted for guidance, Pastor Evelyn Monroe. She was the perfect example of devotion, a loving wife, a caring mother, a respected leader. But Evelyn had a secret she couldn't afford to let anyone know. She wasn't just a pastor, a wife, or a mother. She was a lesbian, and no one could ever find out. She had spent years building a life that looked perfect from the outside. She married a man who adored her. She raised 2 children who looked up to her. And every week, she preached about faith, morality, and the importance of family. To the world, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. But inside, she was someone else. She had fought these feelings for years, convincing herself that if she followed the right path, they would disappear. But they never did. And when she met Naomi Fields, everything she had tried to suppress came rushing back. Naomi was different from everyone Evelyn knew. She was confident, free-spirited, and never afraid to be herself. She had no reason to hide who she was. They met through a church outreach program where Naomi volunteered to help struggling families. Their connection started as friendship, long conversations about faith and purpose. But it quickly turned into something more. Evelyn knew she was risking everything, every text message, every stolen moment, every glance that lingered too long. If anyone found out, her reputation would be destroyed. Her marriage would fall apart. The life she had built would be over. But Naomi didn't want to hide forever. She loved Evelyn, but she hated being a secret. She couldn't understand why Evelyn would preach about honesty while living a lie. As time passed, Naomi started pushing for a decision. She wanted Evelyn to choose her real life or the one she was pretending to live. Evelyn was trapped. If she stayed with her family, she had security but no freedom. If she chose Naomi, she lost everything. And soon, that pressure would become too much to handle. For years, Evelyn Monroe had controlled every part of her life. She had built a perfect image, a devoted wife, a loving mother, a trusted spiritual leader. But that image was beginning to crack. At home, her husband noticed the changes. She was distracted, distant, always on her phone, always sneaking away for church work. The late-night text messages, the unexplained absences, the way she flinched when he tried to hold her. He had no idea what was wrong, but something was. In church, she struggled to focus. Standing before the congregation, delivering sermons about commitment and truth, she could feel Naomi's presence in the back of her mind. The weight of her secret was growing heavier, and Naomi was losing patience. The stolen moments weren't enough anymore. She was tired of hiding, tired of feeling like a mistake Evelyn needed to keep buried. Naomi wanted a real relationship, not one built in the shadows. She told Evelyn it was time to make a choice. But Evelyn couldn't choose. She couldn't leave her husband, her children, the life she had spent years building. But she also couldn't let Naomi go. Then, the first mistake happened. One night, Evelyn's husband found a message on her phone. A message from Naomi. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough to raise suspicion. Evelyn lied, of course. She said it was church business, a misunderstanding. But doubt had already settled in. And Naomi? She was done waiting. She told Evelyn she wouldn't live like this anymore. She wouldn't be a secret, someone Evelyn could love in private and deny in public. She gave an ultimatum: leave the double life behind, or lose her forever. The walls were closing in. The secret Evelyn had spent her life protecting was on the verge of being exposed. And soon, one desperate decision would change everything. The pressure was unbearable. Evelyn Monroe had spent years keeping her secret buried, but now it was slipping through her fingers. Her husband was suspicious. Naomi was growing impatient. And the fear of losing everything was becoming too much to handle. That night, Naomi made one final demand. She had been patient for too long, and she refused to be treated like a mistake any longer. Evelyn had to make a decision, now. But Evelyn wasn't ready. She begged for more time. She promised things would change, but Naomi didn't believe her anymore. She was done waiting. What happened next would remain a mystery for days. That same night, Naomi vanished. No messages, no phone calls, no sign of where she had gone. Her friends tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Her landlord noticed her car was still parked outside her apartment, but Naomi was nowhere to be found. Days passed, then a week, and soon the missing person reports began. At first, Evelyn played the part well. She stood in front of her congregation, calm and collected, offering prayers for Naomi's safe return. She reassured people that Naomi was probably fine, that she would turn up soon. But investigators weren't convinced, and when they started asking questions, Evelyn's carefully built life began to collapse. She hadn't expected Naomi's disappearance to cause so much attention, but as the search intensified, old messages surfaced. People started talking, and soon, Evelyn wasn't just a respected pastor anymore. She was a person of interest. What really happened that night? Investigators were about to find out. The moment Naomi Fields was reported missing, detectives began retracing her last known movements. They questioned her friends, her co-workers, and anyone who had seen her in the days leading up to her disappearance. One name kept coming up: Evelyn Monroe. At first, Evelyn played her role well. She acted shocked when investigators arrived at her home. She told them she hadn't seen Naomi in days, that she had no idea where she could be. She spoke carefully, offering her prayers for Naomi's safe return while keeping her answers short. But detectives weren't convinced. They had already uncovered dozens of messages exchanged between Evelyn and Naomi, messages that painted a very different picture. Naomi hadn't just disappeared. She had been pressuring Evelyn to make a choice. She had threatened to tell the truth, and Evelyn had everything to lose if that happened. When asked about their relationship, Evelyn denied everything. She said Naomi was just a friend, a troubled young woman who had reached out for guidance. But the more she spoke, the more inconsistencies appeared. Then, they pulled surveillance footage. On the night Naomi vanished, a security camera captured Evelyn's car near Naomi's apartment, far from where she claimed to be. Investigators now had proof she had been in the area that night. Evelyn's calm facade started to crack. She insisted there was a mistake, that it wasn't what it looked like. But as evidence piled up, her story kept changing. And then, a discovery turned the case upside down. A witness, someone who had been in the area that night, came forward. They had seen Evelyn and Naomi together. They had heard raised voices, an argument, and they saw Evelyn leave alone. The case was no longer about a missing person. It was about what really happened that night and who was responsible. As the trial unfolded, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into place. It had taken months, but now, investigators had the final pieces of evidence that sealed Evelyn Monroe's fate. After Naomi was reported missing, the investigation initially seemed to have no clear direction. But then, an anonymous tip came in, a call that led detectives to a remote area on the outskirts of town. There, hidden beneath the cold earth, they found Naomi's body. The area had been chosen carefully. It was quiet and isolated, far from prying eyes. But the evidence uncovered in that shallow grave would expose everything. Naomi's body had been wrapped tightly in a tarp, the same kind of tarp Evelyn had stored in her garage. This was not a random crime. It was methodical, planned. The careful wrapping of Naomi's body, the hiding of the remains, told a story of someone who wanted to be absolutely sure that the truth would never be revealed. The forensic team quickly got to work, examining the site and the body. They determined that Naomi had been alive when she was buried, which meant she had been murdered in the hours leading up to her burial. The real shock came when investigators turned their attention to Evelyn's car. Forensic teams discovered fingerprints on the interior door handles. They were Naomi's. This discovery placed Naomi in Evelyn's vehicle the night she disappeared. Further tests revealed traces of Naomi's DNA in the trunk of Evelyn's car. Naomi had been transported like a piece of discarded evidence, tossed aside as if she was no longer a person, just a secret to hide. The thought of how Naomi had spent her last hours in Evelyn's car, possibly in complete confusion and fear, broke the hearts of those following the case. It was the discovery of Naomi's broken necklace that shattered the final illusion of Evelyn's innocence. The piece of jewelry, a gift from Naomi to Evelyn, was found in the trunk of Evelyn's car. It had been torn from Naomi's neck in what was clearly a violent confrontation. The forensic analysis showed signs of scratches on Naomi's skin, consistent with a struggle. The physical evidence was damning, but it was the emotional toll that the case took on Naomi's family and friends that made it even more painful. Naomi, a woman of independent spirit, had dared to love in a world that demanded secrecy. She had waited for Evelyn to finally come out of the shadows, to live a life where they could be together openly. But instead, Evelyn had chosen to silence her. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Naomi had confronted Evelyn, perhaps demanding the truth, perhaps begging her to come clean about their relationship. Evelyn, terrified of the consequences, saw only one way out. The brutal truth was that Evelyn Monroe, a woman of faith, a mother, and a respected leader in her community, had used her power and control to end Naomi's life. In the courtroom, the weight of the evidence was clear. Evelyn Monroe had carefully staged her life to appear perfect, a loving wife, a caring mother, a devout pastor. But the moment the truth came to light, her entire world crumbled. The jury took less than a day to deliberate, and the verdict was read: guilty of murdering Naomi Fields. Evelyn sat motionless as the judge pronounced her sentence, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The woman who had once stood before a congregation, preaching about morality, love, and faith, was now condemned to spend her life behind bars. Her family, her children, her church, all of it gone. She had lost everything because of the choices she had made to protect a lie. Her husband, shattered by the realization that his wife was not the woman he thought she was, filed for divorce immediately. Her children, young and confused, would never be able to understand why their mother had made the decisions she had. They would grow up without her, haunted by a legacy of deception and violence. The church, once her sanctuary, removed all traces of her from their history. They erased her name, refusing to acknowledge the woman who had once been a symbol of their faith and hope. The leader who had once stood proudly before them, preaching about honesty, integrity, and love, had now become a pariah. Naomi's family, although devastated by the loss, could finally find some peace knowing that justice had been done. They had fought for the truth, even when it seemed like no one was listening. In the end, Naomi's voice had been heard. Her story, her life, would not be forgotten. The final chapter of Evelyn's life had been written, and it would forever be tied to the tragic death of Naomi Fields, a woman whose only crime was daring to love in the shadows. As you watch this case unfold, it leaves us all thinking, how far will someone go to protect their image? Evelyn Monroe chose to live a lie, and in the end, it cost her everything. What do you think about the choices she made? Do you think justice was served, or was this a case of a broken system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as gripping as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. We'll keep bringing you more shocking real-life stories that will make you think long after the video ends. Thanks for watching.